My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 32 years old, a part-time medical receptionist living in Greenville, South Carolina. And 10 years ago, I died. Not in the way people think when they hear the word. My heart still beat, my lungs still pulled in air. But that night, lying on a hospital bed under buzzing fluorescent lights, I felt something inside me shut down for good. It was the night my husband, the man I'd trusted with every corner of my heart, looked at me with eyes colder than January asphalt and said, "You gave birth to a deformed child. Raise it yourself." Then he turned his back. I had just delivered our daughter, Emma. She was tiny, 5 pounds, 6 ounces, and her cry sounded like it came from some fragile place between worlds. The nurses told me she had a cleft palate and a small congenital heart defect. Words that meant surgery, therapy, a long road ahead. But I didn't care. I looked at her and all I saw was my baby. The delivery room still smelled of antiseptic and warm blood when I heard the sound of my husband's boots against the tile. Ben. Broad-shouldered, dark hair, hands always smelling faintly of motor oil from his job at the auto shop. He glanced at her once, and his jaw tightened. He didn't even ask to hold her. "You can keep her," he muttered. What? I thought I'd misheard him. He looked right at me, not through me, not around me, at me. And in that moment, his eyes weren't my husband's. They were just two hard pieces of stone. "You gave birth to a deformed child, Rachel. Raise it yourself. I'm not doing this." And then he walked out. The door clicked shut and the sound echoed in my skull until it became a roar. Before I go on, if you've ever had someone abandon you when you needed them most, someone you thought would be there forever, I want you to stick around. This story isn't just about pain. It's about how a woman they wrote off as broken became something they couldn't ignore. And if you're new here, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Back in that room, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull the thin hospital blanket over me. My body still hurt from the labor. My throat was dry, my chest heavy. I'd never felt so disposable. I pressed my forehead to Emma's tiny head. Her skin was warm, soft. She smelled faintly of milk and something sweeter, like the promise of a sunrise I hadn't seen yet. I whispered, "It's okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." But my own voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. Ben didn't come back that night, or the next. When I was discharged, it was my older sister, Kara, who picked me up in her rusty Ford Explorer. She looked at me, then at the empty passenger seat where Ben should have been, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't worry about him right now. Focus on you and the baby." The drive home felt longer than it should have. Greenville looked the same brick storefronts, the same church steeples stabbing at a cloudy sky, but everything inside me had shifted. Our house was a small, one-story place with faded blue siding. When we pulled into the driveway, Ben's truck wasn't there. Inside, I saw he'd cleared out a dresser, half the closet, and most of his bathroom stuff. On the kitchen table, he'd left his house key next to an envelope. Inside was a check, $200, and a single line written in his jagged handwriting. For formula. No, I'm sorry. No, we'll talk. The first few weeks were a blur of midnight feedings, doctor appointments, and bills stacking up like bricks on my chest. Emma had trouble latching because of her cleft palate, so I learned to feed her with a special bottle, one slow drip at a time. I barely slept. My wrists ached from holding her in the exact angle that kept her from choking. My shirt was always stained with either milk or tears. Sometimes both. The loneliness was a physical thing. It sat beside me on the couch, followed me into the bathroom, curled up in the empty half of the bed. Maybe 3 months in, Emma had a fever that wouldn't go down. I was standing in the bathroom with her in my arms, steam from the shower filling the air to help her breathe. I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Hollow cheeks, hair sticking out in greasy tufts, eyes ringed in purple shadows. I didn't recognize myself. That's when I heard my phone buzz on the counter. It was Ben. My heart did this stupid little leap. Like maybe he was calling to check on her. Maybe he'd say he was sorry. Maybe we could at least be civil. I swiped to answer. "What do you want?" he said, his tone sharp. "Ben, she's sick." "Not my problem, Rachel. I told you. You chose to keep her." He hung up before I could breathe. Something in me hardened that night. Not all at once. It wasn't like in movies where the music swells and the heroine vows revenge with a fiery speech. No, it was quieter. Like the slow freezing of a river in winter. I started keeping receipts. Every appointment, every surgery bill, every medication. I kept them in a manila folder under the bed. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but some part of me knew one day I'd use them. Kara helped when she could, bringing groceries from Publix or slipping me gas money. She had her own kids to raise, though, and I hated feeling like a charity case. I went back to work part-time when Emma was 5 months old. My boss, Linda, let me keep a small bassinet in the corner of the office for days I couldn't find a sitter. Patients would smile at her, some asking polite questions, others looking away quickly, pretending they didn't notice her scar. The worst was when someone would say, "Poor thing, bless her heart," like she was some tragic mistake instead of my entire reason for breathing. A year passed, then 2, then never sent another dime. Not for diapers, not for surgery copays, not even for a birthday card. Word around town was he'd moved in with a younger woman. I let it go, or told myself I had. But every time I saw a man in grease-stained jeans and a ball cap, my stomach clenched. When Emma was almost 4, she had her second corrective surgery. We spent 3 days in the hospital. On the last night, while she slept, I sat in the chair by her bed scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw it. A Facebook post. Ben and his new wife, pregnant. The caption read, "Can't wait to meet our perfect little angel." Perfect. I don't know why that word hit me like a punch. Maybe because it was the opposite of how he'd labeled Emma. Maybe because he didn't even try to hide what he meant. That was the first time I thought about real revenge. Not just surviving, not just scrapping by, but making sure Ben Monroe understood exactly what and who he'd thrown away. I didn't know how I'd do it yet, but I knew this much. It would take years, it would be public, and it would be final. After I saw that Facebook post, "Can't wait to meet our perfect little angel," I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I kept replaying it in my head. That word, perfect, slicing through the air like it had been aimed right at me, at Emma. I wasn't the type to stir up drama on social media. I didn't comment, I didn't like it with some fake passive-aggressive heart. Instead, I screenshotted it, slid it into that manila folder under my bed, the one where I'd been collecting every scrap of proof of Ben's absence. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure, one day, the whole world saw him for exactly who he was. Life, though, didn't pause for my plans. By then, Emma was starting preschool. She'd had 2 surgeries, with one more ahead. She was a firecracker, quick to giggle, quick to argue, stubborn as a mule. She had these big brown eyes that could melt concrete. I told her, "Don't let anyone make you feel small." She'd tilt her head, smile like she knew exactly what I meant, and say, "Okay, Mama." Some days were good. Some days I cried into the steering wheel before work. One afternoon, Kara came by with groceries. She was putting milk into my fridge when she said, "You know Ben's new wife had the baby, right?" I froze mid-sip of my coffee. "Oh? Yeah. Boy. Healthy." She hesitated, then added, "They named him Benjamin Jr." Of course they did. I tried to keep my face blank, but something hot rose in my chest. Not jealousy. I didn't want Ben back. It was the principle.
He could play proud papa to this new child while pretending Emma didn't even exist. About 6 months later, it happened. I was walking out of Publix with Emma, balancing grocery bags, when I heard a voice behind me. Rachel? I turned. Ben stood there in the parking lot, holding a box of diapers. His hair was longer, a little grayer. His new wife sat in their SUV, a baby carrier, in the back seat. "Hey," he said, as if we'd just run into each other at a high school reunion. "Wow, Emma's, big now." Emma pressed closer to me, gripping my coat sleeve. I stared at him for a moment, then said flatly, "She's 10. Kids tend to grow." His smile twitched. "Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe we should, try to be civil for her sake?" For her sake. The same her he refused to hold in the hospital. "I can call your lawyer," I said, stepping past him. "Come on, don't be like that," he called after me. I didn't even turn around. It took a while for the pieces to click, but the more I thought about that run-in, the more I realized Ben wasn't looking for reconciliation. He was fishing. And sure enough, a month later, a letter came in the mail. Petition for joint custody. I laughed. I actually laughed right there at my kitchen table. I met with a family attorney named Doug Wallace. Older guy, gray suit, smelled faintly of peppermint. I handed him the manila folder I'd been building for almost 4 years. He flipped through it slowly. Hospital bills, text messages, the $200 check, the Facebook screenshot. He looked up over his glasses at me. "Ms. Monroe, this is one of the most airtight abandonment cases I've ever seen. He doesn't stand a chance." I felt something shift inside me, the tiniest crack of light breaking through. Court was ugly. Ben tried to spin it. He claimed I pushed him away, that I refused his help. His lawyer brought up my finances, my part-time job, even the fact that Emma sometimes stayed with Kara overnight. But every lie he told, I countered with proof. Dates, receipts, screenshots. The judge ruled in my favor so firmly, it almost felt anticlimactic. Ben got supervised visitation once a month, and only if Emma agreed. He didn't show up for the first 3 months. I could have let it go there. I'd won. But I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about the narrative, the version of events Ben was probably feeding to his friends, his family, his new wife. The one where I was the cold ex who kept his daughter away. That summer, Emma's school announced a fundraiser carnival. I volunteered to run the ticket booth. Small-town events like this, you can bet half the county shows up. The day of the carnival, it was sweltering. The air smelled like funnel cakes and fried corn dogs. Kids screamed from the rides. Parents fanned themselves with paper programs. I was chatting with the principal when I saw him, Ben, holding hands with his wife, their toddler running in circles around them. My first instinct was to leave, but then I caught Emma watching him, really watching him, from the snow cone line. Her little shoulders tense, her jaw tight. I realized she was holding her breath. When he finally saw us, he walked over. "Hey, kiddo," he said to Emma, forcing a smile. "I'm your dad." Emma's voice was steady. "No, you're not." The people around us went quiet. I watched Ben's smile falter. His wife shifted uncomfortably. "She's just shy," he said to me, like I'd make excuses for him. "No, she's honest." Then I turned to Emma. "Sweetie, go get in line for the bouncy house. I'll be right there." She ran off. Ben leaned in, voice low. "You don't have to humiliate me in front of everyone." I met his eyes. "Oh, Ben, this isn't humiliation. This is reality." From that day on, something shifted. Ben didn't just avoid Emma, he avoided me. No more run-ins, no more letters, but I knew it was temporary. Men like him don't like loose ends, and I was the biggest one he had. I started hearing things through the grapevine. He'd been telling people I brainwashed Emma against him, that I was unstable. It should have made me mad. Instead, it made me patient. Because the thing about lies, they don't hold up well in daylight. And daylight was coming. A year later, our town announced a community awards night. Local businesses, teachers, volunteers being recognized. I didn't think much of it until I saw Ben's name on the program. Community Spirit Award, Benjamin Monroe. I stared at the flyer like it was in another language. Bem! The man who walked on his newborn. Being honored for community spirit. I could have ignored it. I almost did. But then I thought of Emma, how one day she might Google his name and find nothing but praise. And that's when the revenge plan I'd been quietly building for almost a decade finally took shape. I spent 2 weeks preparing. Emails, phone calls, document copies sent to just the right people. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed the right eyes to see the truth. The night of the awards, I put on my best navy dress. Kara sat beside me in the auditorium, squeezing my hand. Emma was with my mom. I didn't want her here for what might happen. Ben took the stage, all smiles in a pressed shirt, shaking hands with the mayor. The applause was loud, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. Because in less than 5 minutes, someone was about to interrupt that applause with a truth bomb no one in that room would forget.
The auditorium smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish, that mix every school gym seems to have. Rows of folding chairs were filled with teachers in floral blouses, business owners in polos with their logos embroidered on the chest, and half the city council in suits that hadn't been dry cleaned in a while. Ben stood at the podium, one hand gripping the sides like he was born to be up there. He was smiling, chin lifted just enough to look important but humble. I sat halfway back, hands folded neatly in my lap. Kara was beside me, her nails digging lightly into my arm in silent anticipation. The mayor was halfway through reading Ben's community spirit citation when I saw it. The moment the first ripple hit. A man in the second row leaned toward the woman next to him, whispering something while holding a sheet of paper. She glanced at it, then at Ben, her mouth tightening. 2 more people checked their phones almost in unison. Here's the thing about small towns. Information spreads faster than sound. I'd made sure of that. 2 weeks earlier, I'd mailed copies of those neatly saved documents, the abandonment records, the court ruling, the custody order, the $200 for formula check, to the award committee, the local newspaper editor, and a few very community-minded folks who were not fans of hypocrisy. I didn't ask them to do anything specific, just included a note. I thought you might want to know the full story before honoring this man. Apparently, word had gotten around. The mayor kept speaking, but the rhythm of the applause lines was off now. Fewer claps, less enthusiasm, and then it happened. From the left side of the room, a woman's voice called out, clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. Is this the same man who abandoned his daughter at birth? Gasps, murmurs, heads swiveling. Ben froze. His smile faltered like someone had yanked the rug from under it. He glanced toward the sound, then toward the mayor, who looked like he'd rather melt into the floor. For a long, heavy second, the only sound was the whir of the old ceiling fan. Then another voice, from the back.
didn't you lose custody for never paying a dime in support? A few people actually stood up to see who was speaking. I didn't say a word, didn't move. I just sat there, letting the room do the work for me. Because this wasn't about me screaming the truth. It was about letting his own past scream louder than any award speech. Ben's wife shifted in her seat, her smile gone, her cheeks bright red. Someone a few rows ahead of me pulled out their phone and started recording. Finally, the mayor cleared his throat and muttered something about moving on to the next award. The applause for Ben was scattered, limp. He left the stage with his jaw tight, eyes scanning the crowd, scanning for me. Our eyes met for half a second. I didn't smirk, didn't look away, just let him see the calm in my face. It was the kind of calm you get when you've waited nearly a decade for something and finally watch it happen. Afterward, people milled around the lobby with coffee and cookies. Ben stayed in a tight knot of a few supporters, their voices low, but I noticed a lot of folks avoided him altogether. On my way out, I passed close enough for him to hear me when I said, "Perfect little angel, huh?" His eyes went dark. "You're pathetic," he hissed. I smiled. "No, Ben, I'm patient." And I walked out into the cool night air. It's funny. I thought that moment would feel like fireworks, like a piecemeal parade in my chest, but it didn't. It felt clean, like finally setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I didn't even remember what life without it felt like. Over the next few months, I heard things. His business lost a couple of contracts. His wife stopped showing up at events with him. Even that seemed strained. Emma never asked about the award night. I didn't bring it up. That was my battle, not hers. Instead, I poured my energy into her. She was 11 by then, thriving in school, taking art classes on Saturdays. She had started making friends who saw her, not her surgeries or her scars. One afternoon, she came home holding a blue ribbon from a county art contest. She stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower and said, "See, Mama? Told you I could win something." And in that moment, I realized my real revenge wasn't the whispers in that auditorium or the look on Ben's face. It was right there in my kitchen, grinning at her own reflection in the stainless steel fridge door. It's been 2 years since that night. Ben still lives in town, but we rarely cross paths. When we do, he looks right past me, like I'm invisible. I'm fine with that. Because here's the truth. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's nothing. And I feel absolutely nothing for him now. What I do feel is pride for the woman I became, for the mother I've been, for the girl who grew up strong despite the cracks in her foundation. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. You don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the quietest, most patient kind of revenge is the one that lands the hardest. I waited. I prepared. I told the truth to the right ears. And when the moment came, I let it speak for itself. Sometimes the best revenge is just living a life so strong and steady, it makes their absence look like the biggest mistake they ever made. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever been in a situation where someone walked out on you and you found your own way to justice, I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments. You never know. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.